Welcome to the Duval Mission Podcast. I'm here with head coach John Galloway. Coach, it's the offseason. No games are on the horizon, but in Division I lacrosse, the margins are tight, and this is kind of where you get on the plus side or the negative side. What's going on this summer with the Dolphins?
Yeah, great question. I appreciate you mentioning it. I think so much of the focus right now is shifting for a lot of people in the country to college football. And in college football, you always hear about the lifeline of any program is recruiting. And while the lights aren't on and there's not people in the stands, you are building your roster and your organization right now, not only for this year, but for the future. I mean, we're recruiting young men that won't impact this program for another 2, 3, up to 6 years. So for us, it's about really looking into the forecast in the future of what this program could look like, and then making sure we're bringing in people that we feel like are going to help the organization. So a lot of it is planning for this year's team, but majority of our time in the offseason is spent talking about the future of the organization and what the people in the locker room might look like once we get there. Yeah,
roster building is a big part, and like you mentioned, it widespreads almost a decade. The guys coming in now will contribute, all the way till 4 years from now, sometimes 5. With the new rules coming in, there's a lot of talk about new rules and new scholarship limits. What is kind of going on with that, and how do you guys foresee that going?
Yeah, so much is still to be written on the House settlement and what's going to happen with scholarship opportunity, which I think a lot of people are seeing the potential of sports increasing scholarship, but with that comes roster cap limits as well. And again, so much of this is not finalized yet, so we are speculating, but we are planning as a coaching staff, which I think we need to be proactive with to make sure that our roster is built around that number where we can have a group of guys that's coming into campus and have the opportunity for them to compete. We've always been a little bit of a larger roster size, which has certainly been beneficial for us, but there's a lot of positives to having a smaller roster size. So if that is to kind of become the final product of this decision, then we'll make our adjustments, and we already kind of are, and making sure that we're putting everybody in a position to be successful, whether it's guys coming into our program or guys heading elsewhere. We want to be fair, transparent, and honest to everybody that's coming in that, hey, this might be what the future looks like, and we have to do our best to be transparent. And we have a saying in our program, clear as kind, and to try to be as clear as possible with the information we have and make sure that we're setting up Jacksonville lacrosse for success in the future.
Yeah, I mean, with the ever-changing landscape of college athletics as a whole, the staff has to be able to prepare for that. A new addition, not a new addition to the staff, but maybe a title addition, Coach Chris Brzezinski named the recruiting coordinator, already the associate head coach, but now recruiting coordinator. What does that mean kind of for the program as a whole?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. I think recruiting, as we just mentioned, I mean, it's so much of the lifeline of your program. It's not only, what the talent is, but it's what the identity of your locker room is going to take. And I think Coach P has kind of separated himself nationally as a guy who invests the time, effort, and energy to find the right people, not just the right players. So you've seen it in the past couple of years with the profile of our recruits being elevated, and I think Chris has been a huge piece of that. And ultimately, he loves being on the road, and my vision is to surround myself with people that can make us better, and Chris is a guy that makes us significantly better on the recruiting trail and allows me to focus on maybe some other areas this time of year, and allows Chris to kind of carry that flag and that torch forward. So super happy for him. I know he was excited about it. I know he takes a lot of pride in it, and obviously all of us have to recruit. This isn't a singular focus, a singular individual that can carry the amount of weight that comes along with recruiting, but I think Coach P can now be the due north, and us as a staff can fall in line and make sure that we're covering as much ground as we possibly can.
Absolutely, and we already talked about how you plan for years and years in advance, but tell me kind of about this new class coming in, the class of 2024.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. One of our alumni sent me a picture of the rankings, and it is the highest profile recruiting class we've ever had as a program. And with that comes a lot of excitement. It comes a lot of, there'll be a lot of competition. There'll be a lot of conflict this fall, which is what we're hoping for, is to create an atmosphere on a daily basis here in this building where you are constantly playing to try to go 1-0. And that's a huge theme for us this year. You can't assume that you're going to get anything when you roll onto campus on August 19th. You're going to have to earn it on a daily basis. And because of the competition we've been able to bring in and the depth of talent we've been able to bring in, I do believe that practice is going to become a lot more meaningful to everybody in our organization. So certainly excited about the guys. I mean, we feel like we've created some depth and some competition at each position. We've created a great boost in talent, but they're going to be freshmen. And I think we're all cognizant of that. And when you look at our roster, there's a path to creating a starting lineup without one freshman in that conversation. And I think that's good. That means we have guys coming back that have put themselves in a position to earn it. And we're going to bring a wealth of youth and talent in to push and potentially take over some of those spots. So you're going to see a battle on day one, and I think our guys know it as well. I think our guys are receptive to it because ultimately we want to get over the hump to the mountain that we have yet to climb. And I know our guys are excited about that opportunity with these new players coming in.
Yeah, last season we saw a lot of young contributors to the team, either by choice or by need at certain points. Do you think that the team will have that similar mantra and that similar style going into next season?
Yeah, I think last year was such a lesson for us. We at one point in the season really had more questions than answers with some of the injuries that happened and just the lack of depth at some positions. And you saw the culture take over and some guys step in a way that maybe we didn't imagine on paper, but they proved us wrong day in and day out from that point on and put us in a position to be champions at the end of the season. And couldn't be more grateful for that. But as a staff, we took a step back even midway through last year and said, okay, we need to make some decisions right now to make sure that we are deeper and are able to handle adversity throughout the year. So I think that we were conscious of that because of what happened last year, and now you're going to see a roster that's maybe a little bit more balanced at each position, but it's going to require a greater sense of urgency from each guy to be able to earn playing time come spring.
Yeah, and I think last year kind of spoke to kind of the culture that you guys have built where, the older guys teach the younger guys and then the younger guys become older and teach the next step. So let's talk about the next group after the 2024 class. What's kind of the process like for the 2025 class as they go into their senior year, their senior season?
Yeah, it's really exciting because you get to go out and essentially all summer watch them play. We really felt strongly about that foundational class that we didn't feel like we were going to go out and recruit a lot of 2025s. We just allowed that class to develop from commitments we already had. And, again, the legislation and the House settlement, that's all going to impact the size of that class. But the guys that we currently have coming in, we feel complement our team really well, which is something that we've evolved into as a program. In the beginning, it was recruit the best guys. If you see a good player, recruit them. Now it's, hey, we feel pretty good about this column of position. What do we need in this class? How could we help supplement, or how can we add addition in the future by recruiting a particular position? So we were a little bit more targeted and segmented in how we recruited, and now it really paints a clear picture for, okay, what do you really need in the 2026 class? So for us, and again with Coach Brzezinski kind of at the helm of this, we can have a clearer vision of, we're not just going out to a field and watching players. We're going out and watching a left-handed attackman because we feel like that's a void we want to fill in this class, or we want to really emphasize the goaltending position, or depth at the defensive midfield because our O-Midi box is really full. So it was conversations like that throughout the summer, along with our staff being on the road, that allowed us to have a little bit more direction.
Yeah, I think you've given us some really good insight from our perspective of the program. What kind of, since you've gone through getting recruited to Division I program, what are the 2025 kids, what do they need to do, what are they going through to kind of get to where they need to be or get to the program they want to be at?
It's an awesome question. I think the number one thing that is an easy and tangible coaches talk about, but is measurable, is compete level. And I think that, we've heard a lot of podcasts this summer about how just kids play too much lacrosse and there's too many events, and I agree with all that. But when you're out there, you got to have a high compete level. And I think that it's more likely now that your stock goes down because of how much these kids play. And, we're looking for somebody who's going to come in and play 15 games throughout the season and play at the highest level to compete for championships. So if you play 3 games in a day, it's easy to see how your compete level could maybe be drained throughout that day or that weekend. So I think making sure that you're mindful of the product that you're putting out on the field, and I don't think that's talked about enough, is the product that you put out, whether it's for one half or one entire summer, that might be the sample size that a coach has, and you want to leave them with an emotional feeling that's positive. So compete level, number one. And then, again, for the guys that commit, what are they working on now? How are they evolving their game? And everybody's good at our level. So what's it going to take you to go from the seventh attackman to the third attackman, or the eighth O-midi to the fourth O-midi? And those are the jumps that I think sometimes young men forget about, because you get a name that you get to put on your Instagram profile, but now you want to go play there. And that's where that next and maybe even bigger hurdle starts to show up.
Yeah, and we led the podcast off with it. The margins are so thin that, the things that you do now will affect you for many years to come even. Mm-hmm. Let's get even further into the future. 2026 class. I'm sure when I was a junior, college felt so far away, but it's really not as far away as, you might think. What's the process for them in this time?
Yeah, for the 2026s, this is really their summer, and that's kind of how they're categorized. Is you have this 2-month runway to be able to get ready for September 1st. So we cannot contact 2026s until September 1st, but then that date comes and, man, it's guns blazing. So we essentially spent all summer evaluating that class, identifying who we felt like would be a fit for our program. That board started with 1,019 names. It gets reduced to about 600 unique names. Then it'll come down to probably 200 names that are more a fit for our program, and then you get that down to that smaller sample size that you're going to pursue come this fall. So it is a kind of this trickle down process where you really start to figure out who makes sense and who could fit our culture, and then the recruiting begins. Like I say to our coaches all the time, what we're doing right now is not recruiting; it's evaluating. We are just going out there and seeing who catches well, who's big, who's strong, who's fast. Recruiting happens when you identify it's you and 3 other schools, and now you have to put your stamp on what this could look like for that young man. So that's the fun part for us, but we're right in like the middle third of it, where we're shrinking that board and talking to coaches and doing essentially a vetting process to be able to make sure that we make some decisions that we feel are in the best interest for the young man in the program. And we've made mistakes in the past, and we're learning from those mistakes and making sure that we're doing our due diligence going into this fall.
Yeah, and I'm sure the process gets complicated for recruits and their families. What are 3 things? What are the 3 most important things that you would want a recruit and his family to know?
Yeah, number one, and I learned this long ago, is this process is yours, not ours. The reality of lacrosse recruiting is we have 1,000 names on our board. That means there's probably 20,000 players out there, and that's just a rough estimate. The likelihood that us 4 coaches that are on the road are going to see you play more than once or twice is so small. And now we have to see on the half that you play well. The analogy I always use is, we have to fly everywhere. So I fly from Jacksonville to Baltimore, and my flight is 20 minutes delayed. That means I missed the first half of the first game. And your son plays goalie, and he plays in the first half. Well, that one opportunity for me to see you play is now down the drain. And I know that seems, like, he's going to see you play again. Well, there's 36 teams, and there's 18 different fields, and there's 4 different divisions, and maybe the game that you're playing is the one game I'm going to go watch one of our 2025 commits, and the likelihood is so small. So owning this process, and I think it's really simple. If you want to play Division I lacrosse, you just went from 10,000 colleges to 70. And then you want to play Division I lacrosse south of Baltimore. Okay, well, you just went from 70 programs to 20. Well, now all of a sudden you can start to look at the business programs, the size of school, the graduation rates, all the numbers that might lead you to a 5 to 7 school profile, and now make sure that you're getting in front of those coaches. So I would encourage parents to take the reins of this process. Number 2 is to make sure that your interests align with the people around you. And that's something I had a great experience of in high school. I had to take a list of 10 schools to my high school coach, and I had to defend them. And essentially my job was to defend them. Could I play there? Was it an academic fit? Why would I want to go there geographically? And then my coach's responsibility was to tell me whether or not I could play there. And I get it. Everyone's got a chip on their shoulder. Everybody wants to say they could play at the highest level. But you have to have great people around you that you trust that will give you honest feedback about where you could fall. I think that's really important. And then the final piece for me is, people say it all the time, is the litmus test of, if lacrosse were to go away, would you still be happy at that institution? Can you walk around campus without the lacrosse influence on you and say, wow, this is a campus I could see myself happy with. This is the dorm I could see myself working here. For us, 70% of our alums stay in Jacksonville after they graduate. So is this a city that you'd be excited to come back to after Thanksgiving break or after summer break? And that's a question that only a family can answer themselves, not a coaching staff. Once you answer those three things, then we can start to get heavily involved in the fit, and then obviously the recruitment process begins.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people, a lot of coaches kind of say it's not a 4-year decision, it's a 40-year decision. And I think that Jacksonville has that, as Exhibit A. I mean, like you said, 70% stay here. You mentioned earlier that, you have to fly to get to kind of these hotbeds of, prep lacrosse. That's obviously a challenge recruiting here in Florida. What are some of your greatest challenges with recruiting here in Florida?
Yeah, I think number one is obviously just a familiarity. When I grew up in Syracuse, I knew Syracuse University, I knew Cornell, I knew some of the blue bloods of our sport, but you don't get to be exposed to maybe some of these other institutions. And I hear it all the time on our visits. Man, I didn't expect this, or I had a perception of what campus was going to be like. So that's number one. Number two is the city. I think people don't know enough about Jacksonville. They know the Jaguars. They might know the players is held here, but they don't know all that the city has to offer. People are shocked when I tell them that Jacksonville is the largest city by landmass in the country, because you could really have every stretch of nature or type of geographic location when you talk about Jacksonville, and people just don't know. So it's our job to educate on what this city offers. It's our job to paint a picture on how important lacrosse is, and then that's the final chapter, is being the only Division I program in Florida. People have this perception of, okay, small private school in an area that maybe lacrosse isn't as eccentric as some of the other locations, but lacrosse matters here. Lacrosse matters to our administration. It matters to the community. It's blowing up at an incredibly fast pace at the high school and youth level, which is only helping the growth of our game here at the Division I level. So once you kind of pull the curtains back to what this place offers, you find out that lacrosse really is meaningful here and can be something that we can build on.
Yeah, when I moved here, I had the exact same experience where I moved here and I knew of Jacksonville, obviously, because, Jaguars players, stuff like that. But I didn't know, the beach. I didn't know how important that is to the city and how big of a piece that is. And really, there's just a lot in Jacksonville that you don't know is here until you come visit.
Absolutely.
So we talk about the 2026 class in September 1st. As a staff, how would that look?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's making sure we do our homework right now. It's making sure that the calls and the text messages that we send out at midnight or that morning are received by somebody who could be interested. And I think a lot of time is spent on young men that we get excited about, but ultimately aren't a great fit for whatever reason. So it's our job to make sure we're doing as much homework as we can in the vetting process right now. From that, it's showing genuine interest, not sending out 100 text messages. We mentioned how big that board was. Well, our job is to make that board as small as possible and be as targeted as possible, so our time and resources can be spent on young men that we feel like could truly be a part of our program. And then the final piece of it is being really decisive in our decision making, because we are so far away. When I was at Providence, or especially at Syracuse, it's so geographically a little bit easier to get to, that you can have visits all the time, and maybe there's not an obligation of a next step. Here at Jacksonville, I find it's our responsibility when we're recruiting a family or we're inviting them down to campus that, hey, there's a step 2 to this. We're not going to ask you to spend that amount of money and time to fly down here and not have a plan for you. So it's our job to be a little bit more decisive as well, and put these families in a position where they can come down here and feel like, hey, there's going to be potentially a future here if this is a fit for both sides. So that's something that we really have to focus on going into that month.
Yeah, it feels like both sides need to have a lot of intentionality. Whereas, like you said, we have 1,000 kids on our board, and they maybe have 100 schools on theirs. And so it's the process of kind of coming to the middle, and they narrow it down and you narrow it down, and then eventually you guys have one, and then we have one, mm-hmm. and then that it all works together, which I kind of like. I like that kind of idea. September 1st, that's kind of the start of fall, in my opinion. How does it play out for recruiting for the 2026 class?
Yeah, I think there's been so much talk even right now about September 1st, which it is an important date. But after that, there's this wave of kind of a pause. And I think there's a lot of panic that happens in that wave. And the reality is we're all excited because this is the start of the race. But that's exactly what it is, just the start. And we're probably going to have this hard 6-week push of visits and offers and relationships and all the things that happen with that. And then at the end of that, you're going to have 3 guys or 4 guys. And then the wave starts again. And we'll go into November and we'll go and have a chance to evaluate these kids again. And then we'll have our coaches convention in December, which allows us to evaluate players again. And then all of a sudden the new year begins and it's your team. And you'll see where you are in that class. You may have 3 commits, you may have 8. And then you reassess. You reevaluate your board. You kind of reset, what that looks like. It's like the draft. I compare everything to the NFL because there are a lot of similarities. Everybody's got a plan in round 1 because it's a little bit easier to predict. Round 7 is a little bit harder because now you're looking for those guys that are real diamond in the rough or have a unique skill set, and that's what this process plays out. It's just the NFL draft plays out in 3 days. This might play out in a year and a half. And we have to, again, be really patient and diligent to make sure that, the guys that we do add to this program are the ones that we feel like are the perfect fit.
Absolutely. Do you think would you say that if you had some advice, it would be maybe not to panic? Like if you don't get on the offset, if somebody's not knocking on your door, don't panic. Like there is time.
Yeah, everybody says that, and I know families don't feel it that way, but the truth is we have found that we've had the most of our success at the end of a class. When you kind of know where your board is, you know what your needs are, and now there's a little bit more, as you mentioned the word, intentionality on who you're recruiting. So everybody's going to be looking at their phone at 12:01 a.m. on September 1st, and there is going to be a handful of kids that do get a lot of love at that point. That is just chapter 1 of a much longer story in this process, and there's very few instances where a guy doesn't find the right home. And I think if you're just able to take a step back and a deep breath, you'll find that calm and that patience often leads you to the right decision versus sometimes some poorly rushed decisions in the beginning of the process just because you're excited.
Yeah, absolutely. The process of chiseling down where you fit, where the school wants you to be, things like that. What is maybe one message that you want to leave to kind of all the players out there, regardless of class, who may have an interest in Jacksonville?
Yeah, I would say continue to love doing what you do. I heard a great story the other day about a young man who's essentially was a little bit losing the love of the game based on the recruitment process. And if you take a step back, like lacrosse, you're supposed to play lacrosse, and recruitment's a byproduct of that. And I think that too much of what's happening right now is playing for recruiting, where this game is meant to be played in a very free, creative style. And I don't think that we're doing a good job of promoting that because everything is a recruiting event or a prospect day or a showcase or an elite showcase, all these words, these buzzwords that put pressure on a kid who's supposed to just be going out and kind of navigating his game and learning what works and what doesn't work and trying new things. So ultimately, guys are going to find their market. Very rarely, I'd say the bottom 1% don't go to the right place. But a majority of guys go through the process, play the game the right way, play with a competitive edge, are going to find the right comfortable home. And, I tell people all the time, everybody else in your class, they're going to start college recruiting their senior year. That's when college recruiting and college applications start. We, in a way, kind of get this head start because lacrosse has given them this tool to be able to look at colleges earlier. So as much stress is gonna fall on the shoulders of a lot of these families on September 1st, just remember, you're actually a year ahead of all your classmates who are going to start this next fall. So if you look at it in a way of opportunity, I think that can be a way to kind of alleviate some of these stressors that come along with September 1st.
I like that. Would you say that when kids are playing, when you're watching, when kids are playing free and loose instead of playing for recruiting, would you say that showcases like their ability and their talent more than if they're playing to get scholarship offers or to get recruited? Absolutely.
I hear stories from club coaches all the time that are, especially at the end of the summer, kids are saying, I don't want to play, I don't want to screw this up. And you feel that tension. I mean, it's true in the Olympics right now as you're watching. I mean, all these games that are happening only every 4 years, but the emotion of that one moment can kind of take you over. And if you allow your game to do the talking, it writes its own story. If you try to make a play because there's a Coach A on the sidelines, you are setting yourself up for failure. So, and ultimately, we have to have a great sample size as well. So it's not one play or one mistake that's going to decide your fate. So allowing the summer or the fall or even the spring to play itself out, everybody finds their path, and I've learned that in the process. There's not one spot for each team, and lacrosse allows us to recruit that way. So doing it the right way is doing it by just playing your game and allowing your game to do the talking.
And I'm sure that allows you to develop your game. So the recruiting will come as long as you develop your game, and so those kind of go hand in hand. Well, thanks, Coach. It was a great time. We can't wait for the season to start. I know it's a long ways away, but we're excited.
Thanks. Appreciate it.